years ago, we moved onto our homestead. We were excited, we were eager to get started, but how do you know what to put on your homestead and where it should go kind of in the midst of all the acreage? So come along today, we're gonna give you a tour of our homestead and show you how we chose to create the homestead layout that we did.
So we're starting off right here on our back porch, and our back door is literally like right behind the camera here. Before we walk around and kind of give you a lay of the land and the full tour and layout of our homestead, we just want to talk a little bit about principles of layout and kind of just some of the philosophy, things that we considered before we just started making big drastic changes or plopping things in different places around our homestead. So the first thing we really considered was the values and goals of our family. Thankfully for us, that was already pretty clear kind of heading into planning out our homestead layout. But the biggest thing for us was to be able to feed our family year-round as much as possible right here from our homestead. And so as we kind of walk around, take a tour, you'll kind of see an emphasis on things like storage crops, and we have a family milk cow, and we have both laying hens and meat chickens, and all things that kind of are food for our family year-round. If you are not very clear on kind of values and goals, we'd recommend that kind of being step one, to kind of just sit down and really talk through those things before you start making like big changes and implementing things on your homestead right away. And then the next thing is location of everything, and considering just the time factor of all the little daily tasks and chores of what you're going to be doing on your homestead, right? Anytime you hear people talk about real estate, it's all about location, location, location. And that's sort of the same as you're thinking about just your overall homestead layout. So some people take it as far as like actually walking out the distance and like counting the steps of where things are and where they're located if you're just trying to figure out where to put something in proximity, because that's going to be the reality that you're living in every day, whether it's placing your chicken coop or a garden or something, or
compost bin.
Yeah, like all these things, you might be walking out to those daily. And so you really want to consider that and just the reality of your time and moving back and forth between these things. And so that makes a huge difference. And sort of, we're going to talk about some different like permaculture principles as we go, but there's this permaculture kind of layout thing that talks about zones for your land, your homestead. And so zone 0, you start at 0, that's your house and where you spend the most time, and then it goes out from there up to 5. So it's 0 is your house, 5 is like the far out reaches of your land. You basically want to stack as many of the things that you're going to be doing daily or giving attention and time to daily in those closer zones. And so we're gonna start as we walk. We're gonna start at kind of here at zone 0 and move out from there. So let's go take a tour of our homestead.
All right, so we moved about 20 feet back from where we were at our house to kind of stop one on our little tour here. And so this is a big, right behind us here, it really doesn't look like much because it really needs to be weeded, but this is a big asparagus patch that we have planted. So like Jim said, we really want to have a big emphasis on growing food to feed our family all year. And so specifically for us, that look like really trying to grow as many perennial crops as we can. And so when we moved in, this area was all covered with a nice ground cover that the previous owners had put in. But we wanted to put more kind of food producing perennials. And so we turned a good chunk of this area into an asparagus patch. And so we are on year 2 of that, and we really need to weed it right now, but that's what we have going on here. And then just behind where the asparagus is, there is a ton of black raspberries. So in these summer months, especially early July here, we spend a lot of time out here harvesting as many of the black raspberries as we can to preserve and to freeze to have for the year ahead of us. So the other thing we really love about this area here right behind and really all around our house is something that we didn't do, but the previous people who lived here just planted a ton of big trees. So maples and pines and what else have we got here? Oaks. And so this is just a really nice area that provides a ton of shade. Shade that helps keep our house cool, shade that when we're back here just keeps this area super, super pleasant and makes you really want to be out there. So like this past weekend, for example, we were butchering our chickens. We were processing over 100 chickens and it was over 90 degrees outside, but it felt so pleasant, so cool, just because we had all of this nice shade and cover right around the house here.
So just shifting a little bit over from where we were just at and kind of alongside the like black raspberry area that Joelle was just talking about. So this is our pig pen here, which it's wildly overgrown right now. It's really hard to even tell what's going on back there, but you could kind of see the hog panel that we put in. It was just a really like as simple of a setup as we could get in with some T-posts, hog panel, tied it all together and just kind of added it to this little wooded area back here, and we just thought this would be a really good use. There was like some walnut trees and some pine trees, and yeah, it just seemed like the perfect spot to put a pig where they could get some natural forage from that, but it's also close to home, and so it just makes kind of the routine chores and maintenance and anything we're going to do and monitoring things with our pigs really simple. We don't actually have any pigs right now. We raised them in the past and we plan to get more in the future, but that just wasn't in our capacity right now with where we're at in life. And so we don't currently have pigs. There's like a huge, all of the like branches and stuff that have come down around our homestead. I've just been collecting in a giant pile in there that you might be able to see. And my plan is just to mulch all those eventually. And that's going to be like the bedding for that whole area to kind of layer as we get pigs to keep the smell at bay. But that's our pig pen. We also have our compost area is in there too, which is nice because all this is literally like right outside our back door. And so running our like kitchen scraps and compost outside is really simple. We initially had that kind of in this area, then we built the pig pen around it. Our plan is to kind of relocate and do like a little more official compost system with some, putting some like pallets up and making an area designated for compost. Right now we just kind of throw things in there in a pile, let it compost down, and it's simple. It works for us. But again, it's just nice to have all of this kind of right here, right out our back door. Like right here, that little green roof thing on the post, that's our fencer. We have a electric fence around the pigs, and that also runs out during certain parts of the year, runs out to our cows fencing as well. And so it's really convenient. I could just look out like our back window of our house and check on that and see if the little blinky light is on or not. And it's it's just right there. It's convenient. I can know if it's turned on or working or whatever. So that's our kind of pig pen / compost area.
All right, so we're just taking a quick pit stop here, kind of along our journey around the back of our property. So this is the screen shack, what we have called it, and it's awesome. So someone who lived here before us put just a nice screened in
outdoor
shack.
Space, yeah.
Yeah, and so we love having this. We spend, like, anytime we have groups over, it's awesome because you can put food in here and don't have to worry so much about bugs and things like that. We spend most of our meals out here during different times of year. And so just if you're considering different options for your homestead, maybe consider putting something like this. We have so appreciated having it here in our backyard.
All right, so we hopped on over to our barn just a little ways, and there's nothing fancy about it. It's like a 30 by 50 foot pole barn. And again, this was already here and built before we moved in, but we often talk about how like whoever laid this, the land out and kind of some of the things that were existing that we inherited initially really knew what they were doing, because it's just in a great location. It's close to the house. It's probably only like 50, 75 feet from our back door or something like that. And it's kind of like front and center on the land. And in a lot of ways, the barn, especially if you have animals, ends up becoming kind of like the main hub of your land. That's just like, I'm in and out of the barn every single day for chores, doing lots of things. That's where our water hydrant is located in the barn. So all of our water source for anything, whether we're irrigating crops or whether I'm filling water tanks for animals, all of that is kind of located and controlled in our barn. We store feed in there. We have all of our equipment. Pretty much everything is in there. And so so that's just kind of our barn. What also made a lot of sense was to actually put our chicken coop inside of there. I kind of racked my brain for like a long time trying to figure out what the best setup for a chicken coop was on our property. And then I had the idea, why can't we just put it inside the barn? It's already kind of a solid structure. It's got a roof over it. We could just build a simple chicken coop in there and let the chickens basically just sleep in there at night and lay eggs in there, but they're out free ranging during the day. And so we really didn't even need to build like a separate chicken coop structure. We just built it inside the barn, and that's worked out great. There's also a stall for animals in the barn, which works out really well. We're gonna get to, there's some like fenced in permanent pasture towards the front of our property here, right next to the barn. But that connects into, there's a little doorway that leads into a barn stall. It's roughly like a third of the size of our barn. And that has been really great for anytime we have like really bad weather, things like that, where we need to bring our animals inside. We can do that easily. If we've had like a calf born or something and we want to get them some shelter, we bring animals inside for that. So having some sort of shelter like that has been really awesome on the homestead here.
All right, so then just in front of our barn is where we have our large kind of main, just run-of-the-mill kitchen garden. And so we wanted to plant it here. This is actually the only thing that we planted the very first year we bought our property. And so now we are kind of outside that big tree canopy area that shades the area around our house. And so this is a great area because it gets full sun, and so it has been a really just good area for a thriving garden. We get asked a lot about how we keep predators and bunnies and chickens and deer and other things out of our garden, and so we have found that electric fencing around our garden, especially at the beginning, like the first month when things are just getting established around the garden, has really helped to keep those predators out. So that's why we have the electric netting around our garden there. And then behind our garden we have a little orchard. So we call this our kid-friendly orchard. We have 4 dwarf apple trees back there. And so we wanted to put that there. We have a larger orchard that's a little farther out on our property, but we wanted to put something just really close to home. They're dwarf apple trees that were going to be accessible for our kids to get to, so they could just run outside and pick an apple, something that was going to be more of their size at this stage in their lives, and then also something that's just really close and easy for when we have guests and friends over, for them to, you know, be able to grab some fruit, grab an apple when those are ripe in the fall time. So that's kind of what we have going on here. And then we also, right by our garden, we have our raspberry patch, so red raspberries, and then there's a rhubarb patch there. So again, just a really nice sunny area close to the house, so it makes it really great and easy for harvesting. I've definitely noticed, like, out of sight, out of mind, when I do not see something regularly, pass by something regularly, I forget about it. And so having all of these things right here, the garden, the raspberries, reminds me to harvest them when they're ripe, reminds me that I need to weed every so often, and all of those things. So that's really been a great spot for us.
So now we're back kind of in our barn area, just next to our barn, and we're moving a little bit further away from our house now. And this area behind us is our permanent fenced pasture area. So it's about a ½ acre, and this has been like a huge just lifesaver for us on the homestead. I'd recommend definitely having some area of permanent fencing on your land, because we hit pretty much when we have our cows out on pasture, which we'll get to in the back, they're in an electric netting fencing that keeps them in fine during, you know, nicer weather. But during the winter, like with heavy snow loads and stuff, that fence would just get pushed down and it would never keep animals in all winter long. So this is where we keep our animals. It's sort of like the sacrifice area, you'll hear it referred to, because they're in there all winter. They kind of do a lot of damage. We've had to like reseed that come springtime, because there's a lot of like bare areas where they, you know, eat it down and trample it down. But it serves its purpose. It's there for the animals to overwinter in. We occasionally move them up here too when we're like traveling or away, so that chores and everything are just easy for anyone that's watching the farm we'll just move the animals up here. We know it's going to keep them in fine. So that's our kind of permanent fenced in pasture area. We did install kind of between, there's a little area off of it. This is next to the barn here, and that's really been great to have like a separate area where we can separate some animals. So like, especially for having a family milk cow, and if you're doing calf sharing and separating, you know, your milk cow and their calf, that's really handy to have some form of separation in between, you know, your fenced area there. But in that fence line, we actually got a like heated automatic water. It's called a jug, and that thing has been awesome. We found it used on Facebook Marketplace, installed that, and basically it's like a maintenance-free water source for our animals, especially all winter long, and it's heated so it never freezes on us. But animals have access to fresh water all year, and that has saved like so much time, especially in the winter, not having to go out there.
We've never had an issue with it freezing.
Yeah, so they're an investment. They, you know, we thankfully found a used one, so that made it a lot more affordable. If you buy them new, they're definitely an investment. But if you consider, you know, like over a lifetime, the amount of time that can save you just in not having to like run buckets of water out or figure out hoses or things like that, that saves us a ton of time here on our homestead.
So just beyond the pasture area that Jim talked about, still in that fenced in area, we kind of sliced it in half and put a piece of electro netting halfway through. And on the far end, this is where we created our orchard and what we call kind of our quarter-acre self-sufficient garden. And so this is where a lot of the magic on our homestead happens. This is where the bulk of the food that we grow to feed our family year-round is. And so what we do out here is we have 3 long rows, 150-foot rows of fruit trees. So we have 10 trees in each row, so 30 fruit trees, apple trees, peach trees, cherry trees, pear trees. There. And then between the rows of the trees, we have still long 150-foot rows where we plant our potatoes and we plant our Three Sisters garden. So corn, beans, and squash. And so these are all awesome storage crops that last us well through the winter into spring. We're still eating these crops now in the summertime that we harvested last fall. And so this is where all of that happens. And then in between the rows of the trees and the, you know, potatoes or Three Sisters, we actually pull chicken tractors to raise our meat chickens for 12 weeks out of the year every summer. We have 2 different tractors. So this year we raised about 42 birds that will give us chicken to eat all year round.
Yeah, and so this area is like really stacking so many functions and just kind of objectives of the farm. And so I took a permaculture design course a while back, and one of the main things that stood out to me or that stuck with me is that they said before you go and just do anything on your land, you should think through and be able to kind of easily rattle off just like 3 main objectives that thing is accomplishing on your land. And so what purpose is it serving basically? And so it's not just kind of its own, solo thing that only serves one purpose, but you're considering how is this kind of impacting the whole of my land and my homestead and my farm. So just to give some examples of that, so the first obvious thing is just the amount of food that's produced on this little quarter-acre section of our land is huge, and that gives our family so much food. But also just benefits of the rows of fruit trees here. They just provide natural habitat for a lot of the insects and wildlife here all year round, so that's been great. Having those chicken tractors pulled through these rows basically forces us daily when we're going out and doing chicken chores, giving them food and water. We walk up and down the rows to tend the chickens, but we're also walking and checking on the plants and the crops and what's growing out here, looking for pests and predator damage and things like that.
And just a note with the chicken tractors too, is that we always try to do them. We do them in one round, and we always try to do them right at the very end of spring and very early summer, because when we pull them through the rows, when we do grow the Three Sisters garden, the corn, beans, and squash, by July, those squash plants are gonna start to sprawl out and take over. So if we're pulling chicken tractors through those rows, it gets really difficult with the squash plants taking over. So we always like to start our chicken tractors as early as we can, like end of March, beginning of April, so that by the end of June, we are done with the chicken tractors, which is like the perfect time to be out there monitoring things that kind of as those crops are being established, like the potatoes and the Three Sisters, because then after we're done with the chickens, we don't come out here nearly as much because it's not convenient. It's kind of far to come out here. And so at that point, everything's pretty well established and can just kind of take care of itself more or less.
Yeah, and like, so the first year we had this out here and we're raising meat chickens, we only had one chicken tractor and we did 2 batches of them, separate batches back to back, and that put us like further into the summer, and it was just a disaster trying to pull that tractor through these rows as the squash plants were just sprawling out everywhere. And so that was just an easy solution, and you kind of think through these layout things, like building a second chicken tractor was totally worth the cost, and raising 2 batches of chickens early on and being done with them for the rest of the year, that really streamlined things for us. And then going back to the 3 objectives thing, one of my secret hopes for this area, once these trees are more established and mature, is that we would actually be able to raise some smaller animals, either ruminants like goats or sheep, or even pigs, like raise those on the pasture in here kind of later in the season, especially like when the ripe fruit is falling off the trees, so that they can basically forage for,
glean some of the,
like that they can just get kind of a natural diet, and we could cut back on feed and things like that, and they can clean this area up for us and have some nice pasture to roam on here.
All right, and then on the back 3.5 acres of our property, this is where we have our pasture. So originally, before we bought this property, this was used as a hay field that they cut for hay, and now this is where we rotationally graze our cows. And so we had a family milk cow when we moved onto this property, so we have always just been super partial to cows. We really love them, and we've always had between 2 and 3 cows that we have rotated through this pasture every summer from May to November usually. And we have found that this 3.5 acres is just about the right size to max out that 2 to 3 cow range. Honestly, it might be, with the size of our lot, it might be more ideal to do like goats or sheep. You might be able to get more bang for your buck with goats or sheep. But like I said, because we had our cow to start, that's what we've been doing, and we just really love cows. But at some point in the future, we might incorporate goats or sheep into our pasture here.
Yeah, and so there's no permanent fence around this. It's just kind of an open field. And so we picked up a bunch of the Premier One electro netting fence used off Facebook Marketplace. And that was really affordable just to get started with something. You could see behind me there's like a solar fence energizer that we picked up as well, and that's what we have. We just basically have a kind of a square perimeter setup where we kind of move that larger square around this 3.5 acres, and then we kind of subdivide between there. And it's kind of just evolved, like our systems for that over the years of just figuring out what's easiest and what works best. Right now, I kind of just have a system where daily I come out and I just set up, we have some like fiberglass posts with just like a braided electric strand that we use, and just kind of run that through there. So I set up some of these posts and just kind of section off these little slivers within that electronetting perimeter, and just move the cows to a new fresh piece of pasture each day. And that's really worked out great. It's helped kind of restore the pasture in a lot of ways and bring a lot of diversity back into it. A lot of like things were kind of laying dormant, some of the alfalfa and clover, but things have really kind of exploded in just the couple of years that we've been rotating our cows through here, and it's gotten a lot just healthier overall as a pasture, and then that in turn helps keep your cows healthy and well fed. And so
and honestly, we get asked a lot too, does that hold your cows in? People think they need to have these really big elaborate fences with cows because they're big animals, but we have found even just doing 2 strands of the hot fence keeps cows in. They respect fence, especially electric fence. So we have really never had issues with our cows getting out. The only times it has happened has been when we have forgotten to turn on electric fence, and then we've had a few times where they have gotten out, but they've always just wanted to go back in. So it hasn't been that big of a deal. But so they definitely respect fence, which has actually made it really, really easy for us.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about what we have going on here on our 5 acres, what our layout looks like. It's kind of one of those things that it's always evolving. We're always trying to improve, trying to see, you know, what's the best thing for our land, what's the best things that grow in our area, and how can we make this be kind of the best just bang for our buck system for the land, for our family, for our animals. And so that's really what we're seeking to do here on our property. So thanks so much for watching today, and we'll see you next time.